And a blessed good day to you. Welcome and thank you for joining us again today. Greetings on behalf of His Excellency Reverend Dr. Ferdinand Nicholls and all the partners and friends of House of Freedom Ministries here in Barbados. And it is always a privilege and a pleasure to share God's word with you. Here at the House of Freedom Ministries here in Barbados, we partner with the Holy Spirit to equip and empower you to be free to have life and have that life more abundantly. If that's your desire today, if that's bubbling up in your heart, if that's something that you're interested in finding out more about, then just take a moment right now to like, follow, or subscribe, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. Let's walk in this way together. Amen. Amen. Now, the past 2 weeks, we've been looking at the wilderness. We've been going, and we're going to continue this journey today. Right? Of course, for our journey to be successful, we must be headed in the right direction. And one of the things we need to do then is to know where we are coming from. Now, if you missed that series on the right direction that we did a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago now, you could check that out on our YouTube channel or maybe on the Facebook. Just look for the videos and you'll be able to understand why I laughed just now when I talked about the right direction. Okay, but for now, let's just look back and get an idea of where we are. Let's turn together to Genesis 12. We're going to read from verse 1 to verse 7. And as we get that up on the screen, I'm just going to give you guys a minute to grab your notebook, your tablet, your pen, your pencil, whichever you use to take notes, right? Just make sure you have it, all right? Okay, let's go. Going from Genesis chapter 12, we're going to go from verse 1 to verse 7. Reading from the NLT version, as you know, we like to do here at the House of Freedom Ministries. The Lord had said to Abraham, leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you. So Abraham departed as the Lord had instructed, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all his wealth, his livestock, and all the people he had taken into his household at Haran, and headed for the land of Canaan. When they arrived in Canaan, Abraham traveled through the land as far as Shechem. There he set up camp beside the oak of Moreh. At that time, the area was inhabited by Canaanites. Then the Lord appeared to Abraham and said, I will give this land to your descendants. And Abraham built an altar there and dedicated it to the Lord who had appeared to him. Now here we read about when God called out to Abraham, who would become Abraham. God not only calls him out, but also makes him a promise. I will give this land to your descendants. And as we continue through Genesis, God details this promise, this covenant. We see God's faithfulness with Isaac and Jacob. Then most of us will recall the story of Joseph the dreamer, who God used to save Israel and many, many others, and became ruler over all Egypt with only the king, Pharaoh, over him. Then Exodus begins by explaining that there was a king of Egypt who came along and knew nothing of Joseph and what he had done. This king, this Pharaoh, seeing the children of Israel as a threat, he instructed that they be enslaved. Later came the orders to kill all the male babies, all the baby boys, but Moses had escaped this order as his mother had placed him in a basket and set him afloat in the river. He grows up, gets into trouble, and runs from that land to a foreign land. The word says he was a foreigner in a foreign land. The word says he was a foreigner in a foreign land. He got married, and while in the wilderness, he sees this burning bush and begins to have this life-changing conversation as God sees him approaching the bush and says, Moses, Moses. So let's look at this here. Here's where I want us to focus in right now. So God is talking to him, And Moses is expressing his insecurities. But let's look at what God is saying. Let's look at Exodus chapter 3. I'm going to go from verse 13 to verse 22. Verse 13 to verse 22. But Moses protested. If I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? What should I tell them? God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my eternal name, my name to remember for all generations. Now go and call together all the elders of Israel. Tell them, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me. He told me, I have been watching closely, and I see how the Egyptians are treating you. I have promised to rescue you from your oppression in Egypt. I will lead you to a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. The elders of Israel will accept your message. Then you and the elders must go to the king of Egypt and tell him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. So please let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand forces him. So I will raise my hand and strike the Egyptians, performing all kinds of miracles among them. Then at last he will let you go. I will cause the Egyptians to look favorably on you. They will give you gifts when you go, so you will not leave empty-handed. Every Israelite woman will ask for articles of silver and gold and fine clothing from her Egyptian neighbors and from the foreign women in their houses. You will dress your sons and daughters with these, stripping the Egyptians of their wealth. Now let's see what's happening. So Moses is in the wilderness. He's got his father-in-law's flock with him. He's married. He has a couple children, and he's minding his own business. And he looks over and he sees this burning bush and begins to have this conversation with God, where God is calling him, right? Calling him and saying, I have this great thing for you to do. And Moses is expressing some insecurities, saying, no, I can't do this. Oh my goodness. Who am I going to say sent me? No, what am I going to do? But here is where I see something very interesting. And I want you to take a moment to just look and see God's response. God is not even worried about Moses' insecurity. God is not even worried about Moses' insecurities. God continues and God answers the question. God says, hey, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. And God begins to do something miraculous. God begins to call to their recollection who he is. God begins to remind the children of Israel who the I am is. He says, I am Yahweh. He says, I am the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He has sent me to you. And he says to tell them, this is my eternal name, my name to remember for all generations, my name to remember for all generations. Now, the children of Israel had a responsibility to know their God's name. So when the elders would ask, the elders would know. The elders were asked of Moses, what is his name? We need to know for sure that this is God that has sent you. What is his name? So Moses called the name, the eternal name that they would have remembered, or that they would remember for all generations. They would remember for all generations, right? Tell them, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has appeared to me. And he has said this. He's saying, I have been watching closely. I have not forsaken you. I see you in your present state. I see how the Egyptians are treating you. I see the prejudiceness. I see the enslavement. I see the unfair treatment. I see the abuse. I see the murder. I see the irresponsible leaders of that nation, that territory, imposing some crazy things upon you. And I have promised to rescue you from the oppression of Egypt. God is saying, I have promised, and not only have I promised to rescue you from Egypt, I will lead you to a land flowing with milk and honey. The land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. Now let's understand what land God is referring to here. God is saying this is the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. Now we just read in Genesis where the Canaanites live. Now the Canaanites lived in the land that God promised to Abraham. So the elders who would have been, part of they would have held the responsibility for remembering their God, for remembering the promise. They would have been holding on to these stories. They would have been passing them down from generation to generation, right? They would have been passing down to generation, would have recognized this land. They would have known this land. This land was the land promised. This land was the land that was promised to their forefathers, to their ancestor Abraham. This was that same land. And God described this land as a land flowing with milk and honey. A land flowing with milk and honey, right? So I don't know about you, but I've never seen a land that has milk flowing across it like water, or honey flowing across it like a river, So what is it that God is really talking about here? What is it that God is really talking about here? He's talking about? He is talking about a land where babies can be born, where there's sustenance, where there's nourishment. This is a land flowing with milk and honey. Who needs milk? Newborns need milk. Newborns need milk. Honey is one of those amazing products. The beautiful thing about honey, I learned this as I was doing some research a couple of years ago with my wife as it relates to some other things. And I realized that honey, when you get the honey from a certain territory. So for example, if I were to go to a different country, and I was have some trouble with allergies or some sort of sickness or ailment, one of the things that would help sustain me, that would help my body recover, that would help my body resist the allergens from the flowers and the pollen in that territory, is the honey. The honey would sustain me. The honey would contain certain nutrients that are specific to the ailments in that same territory. So if you're going to a land that is flowing with milk and with honey, God is saying, hey, here is a land where it is safe and it is possible for you to give birth to children, to ideas, to businesses. You can give birth in this land. You can be fruitful and multiply in this land. You can prosper in this land. And you cannot just give birth, but you can grow strong. You can grow strong in this land. The things that they ate in the wilderness, often you hear them talking about eating locusts and honey. Well, the locusts and honey, because honey is one of those things that sustains you. So understand what God is saying here. I'm going to take you from where I see you now, from the oppression of Egypt, and I'm going to put you in a land flowing with milk and honey. Flowing with milk and honey. Right? Flowing with milk and honey. And it's important to understand, the fullness of this promise here. The fullness of this promise here. And God continues to say that, you will take the elders will accept your message, Moses. The elders will listen to your message. But here's what you're going to do now after they have accepted your message. Then you and the elders will go to the king of Egypt and tell them not the same thing I just told you to tell the elders, not the same thing, but this is what you're going to tell them. You're going to tell them, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. So please let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. You're just going to tell him about a 3-day journey. You're only going to tell him about a 3-day journey. Now understand what God is doing here. God has laid out a path. He says, I see where you are, and this is where I'm going to take you. I see where you are. Tell them I see where you are, but this is where I'm going to take you. And God begins to reveal the strategy, the plan of how he is going to do it. And he says, you're going to tell the king of Egypt this, but I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand forces him. So God says, I know who it is that I'm dealing with. I know who it is that is oppressing you. I know them. I know them intimately. And I know that these mere words are not going to be sufficient. They're not going to let you go unless a mighty hand forces him. So I will raise my hand and strike the Egyptians, performing all kinds of miracles among them. Then at last he will let you go. So God is establishing the fact that he is going to, by his authority and by his power, he is going to raise his mighty hand and force him to let you go. So you just have to communicate a 3-day journey. Begin there, Israel. Begin there. Begin by communicating this 3-day journey. Okay? So God is doing something amazing here. What is God doing here? The topic for today is the wilderness to the promised land. To the promised land. I know some of you might have read it and try to figure out, okay, so what's Pastor Antonio talking about today? He's probably going to talk about this, or he's probably going to talk about that. But I'm going to stay right here, and we're going to focus on what God is saying right here in this moment. What is God doing in this moment? God has found a man in the wilderness. He has found a man in the wilderness who is not where he was positioned, because he was positioned, Moses was positioned in the house of a Pharaoh. That's where he was positioned. And he got into some trouble, and he ran. So now he is out here now. He's married, he's got children, and is in the wilderness, just minding his own business, doing, whatever he's doing, right? And God is saying, come, I'm calling you back to your purpose. It's time to get on track. And this is what we're doing. So in the wilderness, God is giving Moses purpose, giving Moses a vision, giving Moses a plan, revealing a strategy in the wilderness. Even in the middle of your wilderness, God will not just meet you there, like we discussed a couple of weeks ago. God is not just going to meet you there, but he is going to reveal a plan. He's going to reveal a promise, a purpose, a strategy that will work, a strategy that will work. You understand? And he makes a promise. He makes a promise to Moses right there and then. And he tells Moses and gives Moses certain words to remind the elders of Israel of the promise God made to them. God promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob this land flowing with milk and honey. This land flowing with milk and honey. So what happens here? What's happening here? As we look through Exodus and we go through, the plagues, we all know the stories of the plagues and, the locusts and the frogs and the flies and the water turning into blood. And we're not really going to dive into those particular details. But I want you guys to understand and see the strategy that God has given. The strategy that God has given here in releasing you from the oppression, in releasing you from oppression, where he is giving you the full vision. He's painted a big picture. This is exactly what I'm going to do. When I take you from oppression, when I take you to this land full of milk and honey, I'm going to use my hand. I'm going to send some miracles among them, and I'm going to force them to release you with my mighty hand. That's what I'm going to do. Right? And not only I'm going to do that, I'm going to cause the Egyptian people to look upon you favorably. So the king is going to be rebellious, but eventually the Egyptians, the people, are going to look upon you favorably, and they're going to give you gifts. They're going to give you gifts so you won't leave empty-handed. I'm going to transfer the wealth of the Egyptians to you. That's how verse 22 ends. It says, you will dress your sons and daughters with these, stripping the Egyptians of their wealth. Because I am equipping you now. I'm giving you this wealth, right, for this journey. You understand? God is saying, I'm going to give you this wealth for this journey. Abraham didn't leave Haran without his wealth. We just read that in Genesis chapter 12. God knows that the journey requires wealth. God knows that going through the wilderness, you have to have provision. You have to be provided for. God knows this. And God is saying, hey, you're going to dress your sons and daughters with these, and you're going to strip the Egyptians of their wealth. So there's not only going to be just enough for you, but there's going to be so much that your descendants will have an inheritance. Your sons and daughters are going to dress with these because there's going to be enough. There's going to be more than enough, not just for you to be adorned with these things, but your sons and daughters as well. Your sons and daughters as well, right? So God has spelled out this detailed plan, right? But this is not what God is telling. This is not what God told Moses to tell the king of Egypt. No, God told Moses, tell the king of Egypt that I have called you to go on a 3-day journey in the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. Now let's understand what's happening here. Let's understand what's happening here. Now, God is dealing with a king of a nation. He's dealing with the head of a nation. He's dealing with the head of a country, a government. He's dealing with a governmental head, someone who has government, a government governing that land. So he understands the politics. He understands the law. He understands what's happening in this king's head. He understands the economy of the nation. He understands the social dynamics of that nation. And he knows that it's going to take a mighty hand to force this king. He knows it's going to take a mighty hand to force this king. And he wants to strike the Egyptians. He wants to strike the Egyptians. So he has a plan. So he tells them, only communicate this. Now, I'm not a politician. I'm not a master negotiator. However, I can learn from this, just as you can learn from this, the secret of negotiating, the secret to political negotiations, where God is sending the elders of Israel, right, the rulers of Israel, of that nation, of that people, to the head of the territory, the king of Egypt, as he's saying, when you go to negotiate the terms of your departure, this is what you will say. You will say, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. So please let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. Ask for a little bit. Just ask for a little bit. I know where I'm taking you. You know where I am taking you. But this is where to begin. You know, some of us, we hear God's voice, we hear his vision, we hear this plan, and God reveals this marvelous thing to us, you know? And we we tell the wrong people. We tell the wrong people what God has just revealed to us. Now, Moses was supposed to tell certain people one thing, but when it came to other people, something else. Now, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. This is God giving the instruction. This is God giving the instruction, teaching Moses and the elders how to negotiate, how to walk in God's plan towards this freedom, right? Towards this freedom. Don't disclose the entirety of my vision for you, Israel. Don't disclose the entirety of my plan for you, Israel. Just talk about this part. Just talk about the 3-day journey for sacrifices. Ask about that first. Let's work on that first. Let's get you this first step here first. Let's work on just this part here and now, because we know where we're going, but it is not a microwave process. It is a one step at a time. It's a one step at a time. This journey is one step at a time. So just review this much. And I know that the king of Egypt is not going to release you for this, but I'm going to raise my hand, my strong, mighty hand, and I'm going to force him to release you. And you're going to go all the way to the promised land. Okay, so don't worry about that. Just do this. And we see this happening. We see this back and forth between Aaron and Moses as they represent God's interest and the people of Israel, and the king of Egypt. And we see the king of Egypt resisting each and every time, And then he's ready to give in to a little bit, but he doesn't want all of the Israel to go. He's just going to let the men go. No, before he does that, he says, I'm not going to let you go and do it over there. Just do it here. Do it in the land of Egypt. You can do your sacrifices right here in the land of Egypt. Do that. And Moses is like, no. That's not the agreement. That's not what we're negotiating on. We are looking to do this 3-day journey to do sacrifices. And then eventually Pharaoh says, the king of Egypt says, okay, let the men go. You know, leave the women and children, leave the cat, you know, just let the men go and do it. I'll let the men go. Moses is like, no, all of us need to go, and we need to go carry all of our cattle, all of our flock, all of our sheep. We need to carry everything, because we need these things for our sacrifices. We need these things for our sacrifices. Our sacrifices include the entirety of our family. Our whole family is involved in this process, Pharaoh, king of Egypt. We can't just do it with just the men, but the whole family is involved in this. This is a family event. And we need our flocks. Because we need to look from amongst our flocks and pick out the best of the best. We have a process for picking out the best to decide which animal will be sacrificed. And we need to sacrifice some of all of our animals, some of our sheep, some of our cattle, some of our chickens, some of our birds, some of our, all of these animals, all of our animals are involved in these sacrifices, in us worshiping God. So we have to take them all on this 3-day journey. Yeah. And the king of Egypt says, no, I can't allow you to do that. I see what you're trying to do. I can't allow you to do that. And then more plagues come. So we see this back and forth, because God has revealed a strategy to Moses and Aaron on how he's going to do it. So, I feel as though God is is calling out for some leaders, calling out for some leaders to remember the promise, calling out for some leaders to remember the promise to their forefathers, to their father's father's father, calling out some leaders to remember the vision and the dream, the promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey, and saying, hey, I want to do this. I want to take you here. I want to take you here. And it's going to take some negotiation. It's going to take some work. You're going to have some conversations with some people who are in authority over you, some bigger fish. You know, you are a nation. You are a nation of Israel, yes, but there's a governing body over you called Egypt. There's an Egyptian rulership over you that is oppressing you. You small little nation of Israel. There's this governing body that's trying to oppress you, right? So there's some negotiation tactics that I need to reveal to you. And one of those things is that, hey, you're only going to say this much and ask for this little bit, and I'm going to reveal these things to you. I feel like there's some of us as leaders in the wilderness. We have some provision. We have some flock with us. We're living an okay life. God has provided for us, but we have a responsibility now to shepherd, to go and find the rest of the nation, my brothers and sisters, my family. That's what Moses said to his father-in-law, to the priest of Midian, Jethro. He said, hey, I want you to release me so I can go and see my family and see if they're still alive, see if they're still there in Egypt. You know, that's what I'm going to do. And Moses took his family with him, right? So I feel like if we have that responsibility in this time to begin to do that, to begin to look up and speak to the authorities that are over us and say, hey, I just want to go and take a 3-day journey. I just want to go and take a 3-day journey over here and worship my God. I just need to go over here and worship my God. I just need to go over here for a little while and take all my family with me, all my possessions with me, and worship my God. I'm just going over here. This is a 3-day journey. I'm not going too far. You know, the vision is all the way in the promised land, all the way in the promised land, because God is going to reveal strategies, methods, and I hope you're hearing me, strategies and methods for you to get from the oppressed state to the promised land, from the oppressed state to the promised land with his strong hand. It's very important to not forget his strong hand, his mighty hand, because you have to know for sure who has sent you. You know, Moses had to know for sure who had sent him. So he wasn't necessarily just insecure about this whole idea of going and speaking on God's behalf. He wasn't just necessarily insecure about his speech impediment, but he needed to know for sure that God was sending him, because he asked God, so what if they don't believe me? What am I going to do if they don't believe me? If the elders don't believe me, what am I going to do? And God said, hey, well then what's that in your hand? He had a shepherd's staff in his hand, said, throw it down. And he threw it down and it turned into a serpent. So there were signs and miracles given specifically to Moses to reassure Moses, and also to help with convincing the elders that this is God's plan. This is God's plan. So we as leaders, we need to be able to demonstrate to God's people. We need to be able to demonstrate to God's people his power. We need to be able to demonstrate to God's people his power. Do you hear me, brothers and sisters? We need to be able to cast down our shepherd's stick in a manner that causes them to jump back. Can you see when Moses cast down his stick and it turned into a serpent? Moses did that. Moses jumped back. He had to come into a place. He came into a place of fear. He came into a place of fear. And we kind of mentioned this, I believe last Sunday. I'm pretty sure a couple of Wednesdays ago, you know, family, I know you guys remember that part in Proverbs where it says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all knowledge, the beginning of all wisdom, right? So it brought Moses now into a deeper, reverent, worshipful fear of God. He cast off his staff and saw it turn into a serpent. And then under the instruction of God, he reached out to grab that serpent by the tail, and it turned back into a staff. It turned back into a staff. So he had to have his personal experience with God. He had to be convinced by his personal experience with God in the wilderness. That's where that happens. In the wilderness is where you will have that personal encounter until you are convinced. It is not until you are convinced that you can leave the wilderness and go and do the work. You've got to be convinced. You've got to remember. You've got to be sure. You've got to grab a hold, and you've got to make sure that you are back in that position of that reverent, worshipful fear of the Lord, where you again acknowledge the fullness of his authority. And you can go now boldly. You can go now boldly. And the thing about it is that you are not going alone. You are not going alone, because Moses was not a perfect leader. Moses was not a perfect leader. He had such insecurities, and he had a speech impediment. And he said, God, God, I can't do this. I can't do this. And God was upset with Moses, because God was like, hey, who made you? Who made the mouth? Who made the ability to speak? But God was like, okay, I'm going to work with you. I'm going to work with you. Aaron's coming. Aaron is coming, and he's going to come alongside you, and he's going to be your mouthpiece. He's going to be your mouthpiece. So God is willing to work with you. So it doesn't matter what reason and what logical excuse, what valid excuse you may think you have. God is ready to work with you, because the plan is, the vision is to the promised land. And God is about to do whatever it takes. God is about to do whatever it takes. God is willing to do whatever it takes to get you there, to work with you to get you there. Are you going to say yes? Are you going to go with it? Are you going to say, okay, I'm going to do it? I'm going to do it. Because when you do, and when you walk in to that room, when you walk into that place, and you look at your oppressors, and you look at those giants, and you look at those things that would cause you pain, you've got to be confident in that mighty hand, in that strong hand. And that's what happened with Moses. Moses became confident. How do I know Moses became confident? Because of God's third instruction, because of God's third sign that he gave to Moses. The first two signs God gave to Moses were demonstrated right then and there. The first one was the staff, which I just talked about. The second one was when God said, take your arm and put it into your cloak. And Moses put it into his cloak and pulled it out, and his arm was withered. And then God said, put it back under your cloak again. He put it back under the cloak again and pulled it out, and it was as healthy as the rest of his body. And that was the second sign. But Moses said, hey, what if they don't believe that one either? What am I going to do then next? And God said, okay, if they don't believe that second one, then go and take some water from the Nile and pour it on the ground, and it will turn into blood. And Moses couldn't do that right then and there. But Moses was like, okay. You did the first one, you did the second one. You don't have to demonstrate the third one. I know that you can do it. I know now that you can do it. I know now that you can do it. Allow God to take you through the process that you are convinced that he can do it. Because when you stand before that ruler, when you stand before that authority to negotiate, you have to be confident that when you leave that room and you call upon God to do the thing that he said he will do, that it will be done. Because when that person looks at you and tells you, no, when they look at you and they tell you, no, when they say, nope, I'm not going to let you do it, I'm not going to agree to this, you need to say, okay, all right, God is going to deal with this. And you need to be able to walk away from that conversation walk away from that authority and say, all right, God, this is what you said to do. This is what you're going to do. And it's going to happen. And it's going to happen. And you need to be able to demonstrate in front of that authority the power, the same way you're going to demonstrate it to your family, as Moses told Jethro, to the children of Israel. The same way he demonstrated that authority to them, he demonstrated it to the authority of Egypt, to the king of Egypt. He said, hey, this is God that we're dealing with. This is God that we're dealing with. And after these plagues, and from the beginning, God instructed Moses to tell the king that he's going to take their firstborn. He said, I'm going to take your firstborn. And you're going to know that these children of Israel, they're my firstborn. So I'm going to take your firstborn. And that was that warning. That was that commitment. I'm going to go all the way here, king. I'm going to do this. And then you're going to see. Then you're going to pay attention. Then you're going to know for sure. And that's what he did. That is what God did. We all know, most of us should know the story of the Passover. The story of the Passover and the laying of the blood on the doorposts and the sides and that whole process. But I just want to jump down to Exodus chapter 12, verse 31 to 36. Let's jump down to Exodus chapter 12, verse 31 to 36. And let's just give my brother a couple of seconds to get up on the screen. Yes, okay. So let's look and see what's happening here. Moses has gone in and he has done this. Repeatedly, he has stood before the authority. He stood before those oppressors, that oppressor. And the children of Egypt, the Egyptians, have begun to realize, hey, this is God. This is real. This is happening. And begin to say, hey, Pharaoh, but Pharaoh didn't listen. Pharaoh didn't listen until he lost his firstborn. Exodus chapter 12, verse 31. And this is Pharaoh now. Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron during the night that he lost his firstborn. That same night, swiftly in the same night, he didn't wait the morning for Moses and Aaron to come back. He didn't wait, because before he would wait and Moses and Aaron would come back, they would come back. He would ask them to come back the next day and they would come back. But he said he sent for them the same very night. And here Pharaoh, get out. He ordered, get out. He ordered, leave my people and take the rest of the Israelites with you. Go and worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds, as you said, and be gone. Go, but bless me as you leave. All the Egyptians urged the people of Israel to get out of the land as quickly as possible, for they thought, we will all die, because all of the Egyptians, those who did not have the blood over their doorposts, every firstborn of every house in that territory died. Verse 34, the Israelites took their bread dough before yeast was added. They wrapped their kneading boards in their clothes and carried them on their shoulders. And the people of Israel did as Moses had instructed. They asked the Egyptians for clothing and articles of silver and gold. The Lord caused the Egyptians to look favorably on the Israelites, and they gave the Israelites whatever they asked for. So they stripped the Egyptians of all their wealth. Of all their wealth. Just as he said he would do, he did. Just as he said he would do, he did. He secured that first step towards the promised land. That first step towards the promised land was completed. It took some time. It took some shaking. It took some literal hail and fire. It took some frogs and some plagues. It took killing the firstborn of all the houses of Egypt that did not have that blood applied upon the doorpost. It took that. Because God said, I am willing to do whatever it takes. I'm going to raise my mighty hand. He didn't send angels. He said, I am going to raise my hand. He didn't send two angels to walk in to see what's going to happen. He saw for himself and he raised his mighty hand to carry this out, to do this thing, So let's see what's happening here now. Let's see what's happening now. Let's go to Exodus 13 from verse 17 to 22. And we're getting ready to wrap up here. And we're going to pick up some, we're going to continue talking about the wilderness over maybe next week, maybe next 2 weeks. We're going to see how long it takes. But we're going to make sure that we cover this series entirely. Make sure we cover all of our bases, get everything that God wants to communicate from this out into our hearts, into our minds, into our souls. Exodus 13 from verse 17 to 22. When Pharaoh finally let the people go, God did not lead them along the main road that runs through Philistine territory. Even though that was the shortest route to the promised land, God said, if the people are faced with a battle, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led them in a roundabout way through the wilderness toward the Red Sea. Thus the Israelites left Egypt like an army ready for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph had made the sons of Israel swear to do this. He said, God will certainly come to help you. When he does, you must take my bones with you from this place. The Israelites left Succoth and camped near Etham on the edge of the wilderness. The Lord went ahead of them. He guided them during the day with a pillar of cloud, and he provided light at night with a pillar of fire. This allowed them to travel by day or by night. And the Lord did not remove the pillar of cloud or a pillar of fire from its place in front of the people. Now, what's happening here? What have we just read? We see now that the Israelites now are leaving. They're finally being let go. They're finally being let go. They have all the wealth. And God is going to now direct them. Now, and the children of Israel know the destination. They know they're going to the land of the Canaanites and the Hittites and those guys, the promised land, right? But God did not lead them along the main road that runs through Philistine territory. Now, because God knows his people. God knows you. God knows you. And the scripture says he is not going to put more on you than you can bear. So God knows what they can bear, and he knows that if they are faced with a battle, they're going to change their minds and go back under oppression. Do you understand? Do you understand what God is saying? God is saying, even though I did all of this, I know that if I take them here and they end up in a battle, they're going to run back. So I'm not going to put more on them than they can bear. I'm going to take them this direction. This direction is the better direction. This roundabout way through the wilderness toward the Red Sea is the better direction. I don't know how many of you guys have ever seen this little part here. These couple of verses here. Well, this one verse, which reveals that God specifically chose not to take them through Philistine territory for fear that when they get into a battle, they're going to change their minds. They're going to change their minds. So God is going to lead them in a roundabout way through the wilderness towards the Red Sea. And it says, thus the Israelites left Egypt like an army ready for battle. All right. Guys, you know, we're running out of the time this morning, today, but we're going to come back and we're going to pick this up for sure. But I want you guys to understand, right, that the wilderness might not be the worst place possible, might not be the hardest way to get there. God's perspective on the route through Philistine territory versus the wilderness is that the wilderness is not going to allow them to change their minds and return. You know, it's not gonna be so traumatic for them. They're going to be able to handle the wilderness. So God is leading us into the wilderness. And we look at the wilderness, you look at the wilderness behind me, and you say, oh my goodness, how can I survive? How will I make it? How can I get through this? But I say, hey, no, this is good. This is easier than that other choice. This is going to be easier for you than the other choice. If I were taking you the other way, surely you would go back. Surely you would go back. You would definitely turn around and go back. So because I don't want you to go back, I want to take you this other direction to make sure that you don't go back, and hey, that you can't go back. You cannot go back. And we're going to look into that some more next week, maybe the week after. I'm excited about this, and I hope you guys are going to be back with us again next week. And the next time you see us, we're going to pick this up here. We're going to make sure to pick up right here in Exodus chapter 13, from verse 17 to verse 22. But I want you guys to really grab a hold of this major thing that God is saying today. God is saying that in the wilderness, I'm going to reveal a promise, a plan. I'm going to remind you of my promise and reveal not just a vision, but a plan and a strategy that will work. And I will make sure, and I am going to help you to become confident to step into that. And that's what God did with Moses. God looked at the leader first, at the leadership first. He called the leader first. He called Moses first, the one that would lead, would walk out front. Called him first, the pastor first, the prophet first, the evangelist first. The leaders first have to go through this process. They have to have their wilderness experience first. And during that, they have the responsibility of getting that right. And God is willing to work with them wherever they're at to get them to go wherever he needs them to go, because he's going to do whatever it takes to bring his word into reality, because his word does not return void. And he promised Abraham, this will be the land for your descendants. This will be the land for your descendants. So don't disqualify yourself as Moses almost did. Don't disqualify yourself as Moses almost did. And we're going to come back to that. We're going to come back to that next time as well too. We're going to make sure we come back to that next time for sure. So be sure to come and be with us again. Spend some time with us again the next time. I believe that if not next week, the week after, we'll be on YouTube and Facebook again. And you will definitely hear about how Moses almost was totally disqualified from this. I know some of you guys are saying, where are you getting this stuff? You can read it. If you go and you read into this, you will find it. I'm confident that you will find it. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So that's it for me today. I just want you guys to just grab a hold of that word. I know it was kind of brief. It was kind of to the point. It may not have been what you expected, but be confident in the process in the wilderness. Be confident in that process of going through the wilderness. So that's it for me today. We're going to invite you again, once again, to like, follow, subscribe right here on whether it be a YouTube or Facebook. You can drop a comment below the video, whether it be a YouTube or Facebook. Just say hi to us in the comments. We can connect with you if you want to connect with us. You can just message us in the comments, say, I want to connect with you, and someone from the team will reach out to you personally and make that connect. Maybe have some questions, maybe you want to know more about Barbados, more about House of Freedom. You want to have some counseling, whatever it is, you just reach out to us and we see how we can work with you, how we can walk with you as you journey in the way, of life and life more abundantly. And shortly, they're going to put up the email address on the screen for you to jot down. You can email us if you want to have a more private connection. If you want no one to know that you messaged us, because just drop us an email. That's going to come up on the screen in a couple of seconds. And that's it for me. God bless you. Have a great day. Have a great week. I look forward to seeing you. Well, not seeing you. I look forward to being with you again next time right here with you on YouTube, on Facebook. Have a great, awesome day. All right. Bye-bye.